Goat versus fish. Presentation to you. The verses of two Dylans. In the beginning there was goat versus fish, and goat versus fish. The goatfish said that there should be goat. And that there should be fish. But the goat and fish, they call themselves by all kinds of verses, and once upon a verses there was a goat that called itself Dylan. And there too was a fish. Dylan the fish, Dylan the goat, Dylan the fish, but which Dylan was which? The goat and fish verses, the goat and fish verses, over the very namesake of Dylan. And it was a mighty verses, it was a mighty verses. The verses of two Dylans was at the wondrous Wondercon in the verses of 2,022,022. Goat versus fish did venture to verses at the wondrous Wondercon once again. And Goat versus Fish has uploaded many of such verses to this very YouTube of Goat versus Fish. You should watch those verses. You should watch every verses. Behold the verses of the wondrous Wondercon. But Goat versus Fish has yet to reveal unto you every verses that there was at the wondrous Wondercon. Though if you observed Goat versus Fish on the live streams of Twitch, where you should follow Goat versus Fish, you could have watched these verses live with Goat versus Fish. Be there with Goat versus Fish, but Goat versus Fish. Just yester verses. A Dylan reached out to Goat versus Fish, and said, Goat versus Fish. Said, Goat versus Fish. Do you remember this verses? Do you remember this verses of two Dylans and Goat versus Fish? Goat versus Fish has seen many verses, but Goat versus Fish did remember this verses, did remember this verses of two Dylans? And this Dylan, be it the goat or be it the fish, you shall have to discover this for yourselves. Did tell Goat versus Fish that this was a critical verses. Some say Goat versus Fish, you ask the same true question. Are you goat or are you fish? Every verses, some verses you get goat, some verses you get fish, some verses they sit on the fence, they say Goat versus Fish. You do not have to upload every verses of Goat versus Fish to the YouTubes of Goat versus Fish. Some are too mundane, they say to Goat versus Fish. Too boring, complained the fence sitter to Goat versus Fish. Do not upload that verses, they will not view it, Goat versus Fish. But Goat versus Fish knows that every verses is a special verses. Because the verses are about you. Are you goat or are you fish? Others may witness Goat versus Fish and they may ponder what they wish. But the verses of two Dylans is a critical verses to the two Dylans. They pleaded with Goat versus Fish. How they pleaded with Goat versus Fish. Release the verses, release the verses. It is a special verses. A special verses of memorization of the Dylans of Goat versus Fish. And Goat versus Fish did heed this verses. Goat versus Fish did heed this verses. And without further offense, Goat versus Fish, the goatfish, in all of our benevolence, does presentation unto you the verses of two Dylans.
It is a very fancy, if not fancy, place we are in. The Hilton in Anaheim. Hello to you.
Wow.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Always thank GoatVsFish. You were at the wondrous Wondercon?
It was.
So was GoatVsFish.
I saw it.
Oh, you saw GoatVsFish. We remain live on Twitch. We will not show you if you do not wish to be seen. But if you consent to be seen, we will turn you onto the chat of GoatVsFish.
Okay with that.
Okay with that. GoatVsFish. Who is the neighbor to GoatVsFish?
My name is Dylan.
The name is Dylan. Did you enjoy the wondrous Wondercon?
I did.
Celebration. You saw GoatVsFish.
Yes.
But have we encountered one another? Have we spoken to one another? So what did you think when you saw GoatVsFish from afar?
I wondered what you were.
Wondered what we were.
Yes.
We wonder what we are as well, don't we? Don't we? Yes, don't we? Yes. And we wonder what you are. The question of GoatVsFish and to believe GoatVsFish. We have asked this to thousands before, millions before, and now your versus has come, and the question is, are you goat or are you fish?
Fish.
Fish! Celebration for fish! Celebration for fish! It's a neighborly fish! It's a neighborly fish! Why do you choose fish?
I love water. I love water.
So does GoatVsFish. So does GoatVsFish. Now see what happens, fish. Now look at this fish. Got the fish. Got the fish ready for the fish. Ready for fish. That's the versus GoatVsFish. And then, even at the end of the Wondrous Wondercon, we come into this place and we keep doing GoatVsFish. It's forever GoatVsFish.
That's right.
GoatVsFish is great. GoatVsFish is great, but the greatness comes from within you, fish. It is, of course, you who are so great to GoatVsFish. Well, you could at least say GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish. That's a nice versus. We've got celebration. There are 43 watching GoatVsFish. Very popular versus.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yes, and we do it by just being GoatVsFish, asking the question. So listen. Oh, yes. What do you
I
have
was
to
going
say?
to ask,
Please.
who's won today?
We were about to tell you the same verses. So when we began, hear this about GoatVsFish. You have just been asked the one-two question. GoatVsFish began this verses with 100 cards that are fish, and 100 cards that say goat. GoatVsFish determined that we would get to the end of the verses, and whoever if we find 100 goat first, then the goat triumph, or if we find 100 fish first, then the fish triumph. And we found so many goat and fish out there in the verses. But then WonderCon began to dwindle down, and we still have to find this many goats before the goat triumph. So we have found 96 goat, 95 goat. Can we find 5 more goat? Or before we find 5 more goats, will we instead find how many fish remain? How many fish remain in the verses? We instead find this many fish, many more fish.
Wow.
At least 15 or 19 or 20 fish. Oh, it looks like goat are going to take the verses, but the verses is not over until that last goat has been chosen. So we came into here and we wandered in, and thank you for choosing fish. Can you please, fish? Can you introduce us to more goat and fish? We need to find out who triumphs. We need to find more goat and fish to ask the one-two question.
I think we should ask him.
I think we shall.
His name is also Dylan.
Also Dylan. Celebration. Also Dylan. Celebration. I am GoatVsFish. Hit me. You want it straight. You want the straight verses.
Oh yeah.
We will not dance around. We will not dance around. We will just give you the verses of GoatVsFish. Are you goat or are you fish?
So you're
Goat. It is a goat celebration for goat. Why do you? What? What? We have.
What do you mean what? Goats are OP, man.
We have a versus of Dylans. We have a Dylan versus. We have Dylan versus Dylan. Goat versus fish.
Goats can climb surfaces that are like almost completely vertical. Is that not badass? Wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be cool if I just walked up this hill? Because I was like, I don't know, a goat.
Yeah. 3/4 water and 8 more fish.
I've got one answer for you. You know what GOAT is an acronym for? Greatest of all time.
Greatest of all time. It is a classic versus, but we will concede, of course, that 3/4 of the earth is water. It's a very strong versus for fish. It's a strong versus for fish. Goat. 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 This is your versus.
Proudly.
A proud goat. A proud goat. That was a nice little conversation you had there. Ooh, look at this stylish. Look at the. You can style yourself with goat versus fish right in the side of the verses.
Oh yeah.
Celebrate more goat.
Cheers.
Cheer to you. Cheer to you. Did you have a wondrous wonder?
Oh, it was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
It was a fantastic versus. And what was your favorite part of the verses, apart from, of course, goat versus fish? Who's the most versus?
Well, I would have to say. I'm actually very proud of this gentleman.
Oh, proud of the fish. Wow.
Ran a panel with a bunch of fancy writers and producers.
Writers and producers.
For productions.
Oh, wow.
Animation.
And you
So-
ran the panel. Congratulations to Goat and Fish. Congratulations to Goat and Fish. That's a mighty versus.
Yeah.
That's a mighty versus. So in your knowledge now, Goat, what's next for the X-Men? Are they going to go Goat? Are they going to go Fish?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's going to happen in the versus?
Well, the X-Men normally, actually, they fight each other all the time, man.
They're always versus unto themselves.
First you have like Avengers versus X-Men, then X-Men versus Inhumans. Now it's they're gonna divide. Civil War 3.
Ah, we see. Well, if you look at an X, yes, if you look at an X, and then you split the X down the center of the X and divide it into two, then you will see two V's that are both verses, and so actually it's Goat versus Fish.
The layers. That's not bad.
Well, Goat versus Fish. When you are Goat versus Fish forever, you think about these kinds of verses. Celebration. One versus, you will be doing a writer's panel, and you will be talking about the movie about Goat versus Fish. It will be a fine versus.
So not bad.
It is not bad. It's definitely not bad because it's only goat and it's only fish. There's no good or evil. There's only goat and fish. Celebration. Thank you for this wondrous versus.
Nice.
Cheers to Goat versus Fish. Cheers to you, Goat, and cheers to the verses of Dylans. The verses of Dylans. This was the verses of Dylans at the Wondercon. The verses is not over until we find 4 more goat or 17 more fish.
Oh.
We need to. That is why we have come here. They vacated the outer verses out there at Wondercon, and now we need to find more to ask for questions. We promised ourselves more verses.
You're totally fine.
Is there anyone that you can introduce to Goat versus Fish, Dylan?
Well, I think these gents over here might be hanging out. Trying to catch them.
You may be able to catch them. Goat.
I don't know anyone else here except for this little. Okay.
Well, if you, please, you who run a panel, please take this versus of Goat versus Fish. You are a very professional person.
I do try.
Of course, yes. Oh, you can have all the verses. You can have a Goat versus Fish. You can have a card that is a Goat versus Fish. You can have Goat versus Fish. And you can even have the amazing vinyl decal of Goat versus Fish. The vinyl decal of Goat versus Fish. Stick it upon whatever you wish, and it becomes Goat versus Fish. What an amazing versus! What an amazing versus!
Happily. You need to come chill with us.
Be happy.
Let's go. Yeah. Thank you.
My versus. Always think Goat versus Fish. Secret pocket. Oh, so Goat versus Fish has those verses as well.
Oh, see, we're matching with a secret pocket.
Secret verses. Goat versus Fish. Powerful verses. Okay, let's find out if they're goat or if they're fish.
Yeah, let's go. Good.
Celebration. Thank you for your well wishes to Goat versus Fish. Nice Goat and Fish. Nice Goat and Fish.
Wait, am I coming
with you? Oh, they're breaking. Oh, wait, oh no. Oh, wait.
So, do you know the sound that changes colors?
Oh, my verses.
Just come meet us there.
They're about to leave it here. Wait.
When you go out, you turn right. You see it right there? It's like
Welcome
right there.
to Goat versus Fish.
I know you well. I know I've seen
Oh, you know Goat versus Fish well. They all disperse, but you remain. Are you goat or are you fish?
Now, wasn't that a mighty verses? Wasn't that a mighty verses? To be remembered forever with Goat vs. Fish. Now go, spread the verses like Goat vs. Fish. Subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. Share Goat vs. Fish. And ask everyone you know. Are you goat? Or are you fish? And you should also follow Goat vs. Fish on Twitch. Celebration! Celebration for Goat vs. Fish! And it was written, and it was written.